In a bustling city filled with towering skyscrapers, narrow alleyways, and crowded streets, two police officers named Mark and Ryan were infamous for their reckless behavior. Both men had been partners for over a decade, patrolling the same neighborhoods, year after year. They prided themselves on being tough enforcers of the law, or at least their version of it. However, what set them apart from other officers wasn't their dedication to justice, but rather their blatant disregard for fairness and equality. Over time, they developed a reputation for targeting black citizens during routine stops, often using racial stereotypes as justification for their actions. Mark, the older of the two, was brash and quick-tempered. He believed that authority meant never backing down, no matter how questionable your actions might seem. Ryan, younger and more calculating, followed Mark's lead without hesitation. Together, they operated under the assumption that their badges gave them immunity from criticism or consequences. Their arrogance reached new heights one fateful afternoon when they crossed paths with someone who would change everything: Judge Evelyn Carter. Judge Carter was a highly respected figure in the legal community. As one of the few African-American judges in the city, she had faced countless challenges throughout her career. Rising through the ranks hadn't been easy for her. She'd endured discrimination, skepticism, and outright hostility from colleagues who doubted her abilities simply because of her race. Yet, despite these obstacles, she persevered, earning a reputation for fairness, wisdom, and unwavering integrity. Her courtroom was known as a place where justice prevailed, not just for some but for everyone. Earlier that week, Judge Carter had presided over a case involving Mark and Ryan. The officers had arrested a young black man named Marcus Johnson for allegedly resisting arrest during a traffic stop. However, when the case came before her, Judge Carter found glaring inconsistencies in the evidence presented by the prosecution. There was no video footage supporting the officers' claims, and witnesses contradicted key details of their story. After carefully reviewing the facts, she dismissed the case due to insufficient evidence, citing procedural errors made by the arresting officers. Mark and Ryan were furious. To them, Judge Carter's decision felt like a personal attack, a slap in the face to their authority. They couldn't understand why someone like her would dare question their judgment. In their minds, her ruling wasn't about upholding the law but undermining their credibility. Still simmering with anger, they decided to grab lunch at a local diner near the courthouse later that day. Unbeknownst to them, Judge Carter happened to be dining at the same establishment, seated just a few tables away with two close friends. She laughed and chatted animatedly, enjoying a rare moment of relaxation amidst her busy schedule. Oblivious to the storm brewing nearby, she remained focused on her meal and conversation. Meanwhile, Mark and Ryan entered the diner, spotted her almost immediately, and began whispering snide remarks about her appearance, professionalism, and even her race. What does she know about real policing? Mark sneered loudly enough for nearby patrons to hear. She sits up there in her fancy robe, acting all high and mighty. But has she ever stepped foot in the neighborhoods we patrol? Has she ever dealt with people like Marcus Johnson? Ryan chuckled, adding fuel to the fire. Yeah, maybe if she spent less time playing lawyer and more time learning how things really work, she'd see we're doing our jobs. Their comments quickly escalated into crude jokes about Judge Carter's competence and background. Some diners shot disapproving glances in their direction, while others shifted uncomfortably in their seats, unsure whether to intervene. But no one said anything directly. Fear of retaliation kept most people silent. That is, until a young waitress named Sarah quietly pulled out her phone and started recording. Sarah was only 22 years old, working part-time at the diner to save money for nursing school. She had always dreamed of helping others, but nothing could have prepared her for what she witnessed that day. As she refilled drinks and cleared plates, she listened intently to Mark and Ryan's conversation, feeling a mix of disgust and disbelief. At first, she hesitated to record them, worried about potential backlash, but something inside her snapped. Enough was enough. I can't let this slide, she muttered under her breath as she hit the record button on her phone. For the next 10 minutes, she captured every word they said, ensuring the audio was clear and uninterrupted. When their tirade finally ended, Sarah slipped the phone back into her pocket. heart pounding with both fear and determination. She didn't know exactly what she planned to do with the recording yet, but one thing was certain. She couldn't stay silent any longer. Back at their table, Judge Carter remained blissfully unaware of the venomous words being hurled in her. Direction. She finished her meal, thanked her friends for joining her, and left the diner with a smile on her face. Little did she know, her life, and the lives of Mark and Ryan, was about to take a dramatic turn. What started as a casual lunch outing would soon spiral into a scandal that rocked the entire city, sparking conversations about accountability, systemic racism, and the true meaning of justice. As Sarah uploaded the recording online later that evening, she couldn't shake the feeling that she was standing at the edge of something much bigger than herself. Would anyone care? Would the world listen? Only time would tell. But deep down, she knew she had done the right thing. The recording Sarah uploaded to social media that night didn't gain much attention at first. It was late, and most people were either asleep or scrolling mindlessly through their feeds without paying much attention. But within hours, something shifted. A local activist group spotted the clip and shared it on their page, adding captions highlighting the racist remarks made by Mark and Ryan. By morning, the video had gone viral, spreading like wildfire across platforms. As more people watched the recording, outrage grew. Viewers were shocked not only by the officer's blatant disrespect toward Judge Evelyn Carter, but also by the casual racism embedded in their words. Comment sections exploded with anger, disbelief, and demands for accountability. Some users pointed out specific phrases from the conversation that revealed deep-seated prejudice, while others shared personal stories of similar encounters with law enforcement. The hashtag #RespectJudgeCarter began trending nationwide, drawing attention to systemic issues within policing and the judiciary. News outlets quickly picked up the story, amplifying the public's calls for justice. Reporters camped outside the police department headquarters, eager to get statements from officials. Protesters gathered in large numbers, holding signs that read, "No justice, no peace," and "Accountability now." The city buzzed with tension, as debates raged about racism, power dynamics, and the need for reform. For many, this wasn't just about two rogue officers. It was about exposing a culture of impunity that allowed such behavior to persist unchecked. Amid the chaos, Judge Carter found herself thrust into the spotlight once again. Early the next morning, reporters swarmed her home, knocking on doors and ringing doorbells in hopes of getting an exclusive interview. At first, she ignored them, unsure how to respond to the sudden surge of attention. She was used to dealing with criticism quietly, keeping her emotions in check and focusing on her work. But this situation felt different. This wasn't just about her anymore. It was about sending a message to society about respect, fairness, and the rule of law. After consulting with trusted colleagues and family members, Judge Carter decided to issue a carefully worded statement. In it, she acknowledged the pain caused by racism and emphasized the importance of treating everyone, regardless of race, gender, or profession, with dignity and respect. Her tone was calm, yet firm, striking a balance between compassion and authority. "The justice system exists to serve all people equally," she wrote. "It is my duty as a judge to ensure that fairness prevails in every case I oversee. Let us use this moment to reflect on how we can build a better future together." Her statement resonated deeply with the public, earning widespread praise. Many admired her poise under pressure and her refusal to stoop to the level of those who sought to demean her. Social media flooded with messages of support, with users calling her a role model and a beacon of hope. Even some critics of the judiciary admitted they respected her professionalism and integrity. Overnight, Judge Carter became more than just a judge. She became a symbol of resilience and strength. Meanwhile, Mark and Ryan faced mounting pressure from all sides. Their superiors called them into an emergency meeting early that day, demanding explanations for their behavior. Both men remained defiant, insisting they had done nothing wrong. "We were just blowing off steam," Mark argued, his voice laced with frustration. "People are blowing this way out of proportion. Ryan nodded, in agreement, adding, "If people don't like what we said, maybe they should focus on real problems instead of nitpicking our words." Their dismissive attitude infuriated internal affairs investigators, who launched a full-scale investigation into their conduct. As part of the probe, they reviewed past cases handled by the duo, uncovering disturbing patterns of misconduct. Dozens of individuals came forward, alleging harassment, illegal searches, and even falsified reports, all tied directly to Mark and Ryan. Victims described feeling powerless during interactions with the officers, too afraid to speak up for fear of retaliation. One woman recounted being pulled over for no apparent reason, only to be subjected to invasive questioning and insults based on her race. Another man claimed he'd been arrested on trumped-up charges after refusing to comply with what he believed were unlawful instructions. The revelations shocked even seasoned investigators. What started as mockery of a single judge now exposed deeper issues plaguing the department. Community leaders demanded answers, vowing to hold officials accountable for allowing such behavior to continue unchecked. Town hall meetings drew massive crowds, with residents sharing painful experiences and proposing solutions to improve relations between law enforcement and marginalized groups. For the first time in years, it felt like meaningful change might actually happen. Back at the precinct, tensions ran high. Fellow officers whispered among themselves, divided over whether to defend Mark and Ryan or distance themselves from the controversy. Some expressed sympathy for the pair, arguing that the backlash was excessive and unfair. Others privately agreed with the public outcry, admitting they'd witnessed problematic behavior from the duo in the past but never spoke up. A few brave souls eventually came forward to testify against them, providing crucial evidence that strengthened the case against the disgraced officers. As days turned into weeks, the scandal dominated headlines. Journalists dug deeper, uncovering details about Mark and Ryan's disciplinary records, which included multiple complaints filed over the years. Each new revelation fueled public anger, intensifying calls for swift and decisive action. Activists organized rallies, marches, and vigils, ensuring the issue stayed front and center in the national conversation. Celebrities and politicians weighed in, amplifying voices often ignored or silenced. For Sarah, the young waitress who recorded the incriminating audio, life changed dramatically. Initially hesitant to reveal her identity, she eventually stepped forward, encouraged by supporters who praised her courage. Media outlets hailed her as a hero, crediting her with sparking a movement. Though nervous about potential backlash, Sarah embraced her newfound role, using interviews and public appearances to advocate for greater accountability within law enforcement. "I didn't do this for fame or recognition," she told one reporter. "I did it because someone needed to stand up and say this isn't okay." Despite the overwhelming support, Sarah faced challenges. Anonymous trolls targeted her online, accusing her of exaggerating the incident or seeking attention. Some even threatened her safety, forcing her to take precautions like changing her phone number and avoiding certain areas of town. Still, she refused to back down, knowing her actions had ignited a firestorm of change. As the investigation progressed, Mark and Ryan's arrogance began to waver. They realized, perhaps for the first time, that their badges wouldn't shield them from consequences this time. Friends and family distanced themselves, unwilling to associate with individuals embroiled in such controversy. Stripped of allies and facing mounting evidence against them, the officers finally started to grasp the gravity of their situation. Yet, neither man seemed capable of fully acknowledging the harm they'd caused. Not yet, anyway. In the midst of it all, Judge Carter continued her daily routine, presiding over cases and mentoring young lawyers. While the scandal consumed headlines, she remained focused on her mission, ensuring justice for all. Her quiet determination inspired countless others to join the fight for equality and fairness. And though challenges lay ahead, there was a growing sense of optimism that this moment could mark the beginning of lasting change. The city held its breath, waiting to see what would come next. Would Mark and Ryan face justice? Could reforms truly address decades of systemic issues? Only time would tell. But for now, the people stood united, determined to create a brighter, more equitable future, one step at a time. The investigation into Mark and Ryan's conduct dragged on for months, each day bringing new revelations that shocked the city. Internal affairs investigators worked tirelessly, sifting through years of records, body camera footage, and witness testimonies. What they uncovered painted a chilling picture of two officers who had operated with near-total impunity, exploiting their positions of power to harass, intimidate, and discriminate against marginalized communities. The deeper they dug, the clearer it became. This wasn't an isolated incident, it was part of a pattern. Victims came forward in droves, emboldened by the public outcry and the growing sense that justice might finally be within reach. A young man named Jamal recounted being stopped repeatedly by Mark and Ryan over minor infractions like broken taillights or failing to signal a turn, issues that were rarely enforced in predominantly white neighborhoods. Each time, he said, the encounters escalated unnecessarily, with the officers hurling racial slurs and threatening arrest if he dared question their authority. Another woman, Maria, described how Ryan once searched her car without probable cause, tearing apart her belongings while making derogatory comments about her ethnicity. She'd been too afraid to file a complaint back then, fearing retaliation, but now she felt compelled to speak up. Even fellow officers began breaking their silence. One veteran cop admitted he'd witnessed Mark fabricate evidence during a drug bust years ago, planting a bag of cocaine in a suspect's pocket to justify an arrest. Another revealed that Ryan had bragged openly about targeting black drivers during traffic stops because they're easier to bully. These testimonies added weight to the mounting case against the disgraced duo, leaving little room for doubt about their guilt. As the evidence piled up, public pressure intensified. Protesters continued filling the streets, demanding accountability, not just for Mark and Ryan but for the entire system that allowed such behavior to thrive. Activists organized rallies outside City Hall, chanting slogans like "No badges without justice" and "Reform now." Local leaders joined the chorus, urging swift action to restore trust between law enforcement and the community. For many residents, this scandal represented an opportunity, a chance to dismantle outdated practices and implement meaningful reforms. Finally, after months of scrutiny, the disciplinary hearings began. Held in a packed courtroom, the proceedings drew national attention with reporters and cameras crowding the hallways. Judge Carter attended every session, sitting quietly in the front row alongside victims and their families. Her presence served as a reminder of why the hearings mattered, not just for those directly affected, but for everyone who believed in fairness and equality under the law. Witness after witness took the stand, recounting harrowing experiences with Mark and Ryan. Some broke down in tears as they relived traumatic moments. Others spoke with steely resolve, determined to hold the officers accountable. Each testimony chipped away at the facade of invincibility the pair had built around themselves. For the first time, Mark and Ryan looked visibly shaken, shifting uncomfortably in their seats as their actions were laid bare for all to see. Their defense attorneys tried desperately to downplay the allegations, arguing that the officers were simply doing their jobs in tough situations. They claimed the viral recording was taken out of context and accused activists of exaggerating the scope of the problem. But their arguments fell flat in the face of overwhelming evidence. Even some jurors shook their heads in disbelief as damning details emerged. One officer had falsified reports to cover up excessive force. Another had used racial profiling to justify unlawful searches. It was impossible to ignore the truth any longer. Throughout the hearings, Judge Carter remained a pillar of strength. Though she never testified herself, her calm demeanor and unwavering focus inspired those around her. Outside the courtroom, she gave interviews emphasizing the importance of accountability and systemic change. "This isn't about punishing individuals," she told one journalist. "It's about creating a culture where everyone is treated fairly, where no one is above the law." For Mark and Ryan, the verdict couldn't come soon enough. Suspended without pay and stripped of their badges pending the outcome, they struggled to adapt to life outside the force. Friends and family distanced themselves, unwilling to associate with men embroiled in such controversy. Their homes became fortresses, barricaded against protesters and media crews camped outside. Isolated and bitter, they clung to denial, refusing to acknowledge the harm they'd caused. Mark, the older of the two, bore the brunt of the fallout. His wife, Lisa, begged him to apologize, hoping to salvage what remained of their marriage. "You need to take responsibility," she pleaded one evening, tears streaming down her face. "This isn't going away, Mark. People are hurting because of what you've done." But Mark refused to listen, lashing out instead. "They don't understand what it's like out there," he snapped. "We're the ones keeping them safe." Ryan fared no better. Once cocky and self-assured, he now spiraled into despair, drowning his sorrows in alcohol. Nights turned into binges, mornings into hangovers. He alienated anyone who tried to help, convinced the world was conspiring against him. "It's not fair," he muttered to himself late one night, staring blankly at the ceiling. "We were just doing our jobs." Meanwhile, Sarah, the waitress whose recording sparked the scandal, found herself thrust further into the spotlight. Supporters hailed her as a hero, crediting her bravery with exposing corruption and igniting change. Invitations poured in from organizations eager to hear her story, and she traveled across the country giving speeches about courage and accountability. Yet, behind the scenes, Sarah faced challenges. Anonymous trolls continued harassing her online, sending hateful messages and threats. Some even targeted her workplace, pressuring her employer to fire her. Despite the backlash, Sarah stood firm, knowing she'd done the right thing. Back in the city, momentum for reform reached a fever pitch. Community leaders proposed sweeping changes aimed at rebuilding trust between law enforcement and marginalized groups. Mandatory training on implicit bias and cultural sensitivity became standard for all officers. Independent oversight boards were established to review complaints and ensure accountability. And for the first time in decades, the police department opened its doors to external auditors, inviting transparency and collaboration. Judge Carter played a key role in shaping these initiatives, using her platform to advocate for lasting change. She spearheaded programs designed to mentor young lawyers from underrepresented backgrounds, ensuring diversity in the legal profession. Her efforts earned widespread recognition, including awards and honorary degrees. Yet, she remained humble, deflecting praise onto the countless others working toward the same goal. As the disciplinary hearings drew to a close, anticipation gripped the city. Would justice prevail, or would the system fail yet again? When the final verdict was announced, it sent shockwaves through the community and beyond. Both Mark and Ryan were found guilty of gross misconduct and violating departmental policies. They were permanently stripped of their badges, fined heavily, and sentenced to hundreds of hours of community service working alongside civil rights organizations. Additionally, they faced lawsuits filed by victims seeking compensation for damages suffered. The ruling marked a turning point, not just for Mark and Ryan, but for the entire city. For the first time, it felt like real progress was possible. People celebrated in the streets, cheering and hugging strangers as news of the verdict spread. Activists declared victory, though they cautioned that the fight was far from over. "This is just the beginning," one leader said during a televised speech. "We must keep pushing for change until every corner of our society reflects the values we claim to uphold." For Mark and Ryan, however, the verdict signaled the start of a long, difficult journey. Stripped of their identity as officers, they were forced to confront who they truly were beneath the uniforms. Redemption seemed distant, if not impossible. Yet, buried deep within the chaos and pain lay a glimmer of hope that perhaps, someday, they might find a way to make amends. And so, the city moved forward, united by a shared commitment to justice and equality. Challenges remained, but there was comfort in knowing that voices once silenced now echoed louder than ever before. Change was coming and nothing could stop it. The aftermath of the verdict left Mark and Ryan in a state of shock. Both men had always believed their badges protected them from consequences, But now they found themselves stripped of everything that defined them: authority, respect, and purpose. The weight of their actions hung heavy over their lives, forcing them to confront realities they had long ignored. For Mark, this meant moving away from the city he once policed, seeking anonymity in a small town where no one knew his name. Ryan, however, chose a darker path, sinking deeper into bitterness and self-destruction. Mark's road to redemption. Mark relocated to Maplewood, a quiet rural community far removed from the chaos of urban life. At first he struggled to adjust. Used to commanding attention and wielding power, he now felt invisible, a stranger among strangers. Jobs were scarce, and those available required skills he didn't possess. He took odd jobs wherever he could find them, cleaning gutters, mowing lawns, even working overnight shifts at a gas station. It wasn't glamorous work, but it kept him busy and humble. One day, while walking through the town square, Mark noticed a flyer advertising volunteer opportunities at a local youth center. Intrigued, he decided to check it out. Inside, he met James, the director of the program, who welcomed him warmly despite sensing the heaviness in Mark's demeanor. Over time, Mark began helping with activities for teenagers, teaching them basic carpentry and sharing stories about teamwork and discipline. At first, Mark approached the role cautiously, unsure if anyone would trust him given his past. But the kids surprised him. They didn't care about his history. They only cared about whether he showed up consistently and treated them with kindness. Slowly, Mark started opening up, admitting to himself, and eventually to some of the teens, that he'd made mistakes in his life. "I used to think being tough meant never apologizing," he confessed during one session. "But real strength comes from owning your faults and trying to do better." Through mentoring, Mark discovered a new sense of purpose. He realized how much anger and prejudice he'd carried throughout his career, often projecting it onto innocent people. Now, surrounded by young faces eager to learn and grow, he vowed to break the cycle. Though redemption wouldn't come easily or quickly, Mark finally understood what it meant to take responsibility for his actions. Ryan's descent into darkness. Ryan's story unfolded quite differently. Unable to cope with losing his badge and reputation, he spiraled into despair. His marriage crumbled under the strain as his wife filed for divorce and moved out, taking their children with her. Alone in his apartment, Ryan turned to alcohol to numb the pain. Nights blurred together, filled with binge drinking and angry rants directed at anyone within earshot, or sometimes just at the walls. When money ran low, Ryan sold off possessions piece by piece: furniture, electronics, even his cherished police memorabilia. Yet, no amount of cash could fill the void inside him. Friends stopped calling, fed up with his constant negativity and refusal to acknowledge his wrongdoing. Even his parents distanced themselves, heartbroken by the son they barely recognized anymore. One particularly bleak evening, Ryan stumbled upon an old news article online featuring Judge Carter. In the photo, she stood confidently beside activists, smiling warmly as she discussed reforms aimed at improving relations between law enforcement and marginalized communities. Seeing her success infuriated him. "She ruined my life," he screamed at the screen, smashing his fist against the table. Anger consumed him, blinding him to any possibility of redemption. Eventually, Ryan hit rock bottom. After passing out, drunk on the floor one night, he woke up in a hospital bed, having been found unconscious by a neighbor. Doctors warned him that continued substance abuse would kill him if he didn't seek help. For the first time, Ryan considered checking into rehab, but pride held him back. Admitting weakness felt unbearable, so he returned home, sinking further into isolation. Judge Carter's legacy. While Mark and Ryan grappled with their respective fates, Judge Evelyn Carter continued breaking barriers and inspiring change. Her involvement in reform initiatives earned her widespread admiration, not just locally but nationally. She traveled extensively, speaking at conferences and universities about the importance of fairness, accountability, and empathy in leadership. Audiences hung on her every word, moved by her resilience and vision for a more equitable future. Back in her courtroom, Judge Carter remained steadfast in her commitment to justice. Each ruling reflected her belief that the law should serve everyone equally, regardless of race, gender, or socioeconomic status. Young lawyers flocked to observe her methods, hoping to emulate her balance of compassion and firmness. Many credited her mentorship with shaping their careers, citing her as a guiding light in an often daunting profession. Her influence extended beyond the legal system. Community programs flourished under her guidance, addressing issues like racial profiling, affordable housing, and access to education. Activists praised her ability to unite diverse groups around common goals, fostering collaboration rather than division. To many, Judge Carter represented hope, a reminder that progress was possible when individuals stood firm in their convictions. Public reaction and reflection in the months following the verdict, public discourse shifted toward reflection. Conversations about systemic racism and police misconduct gained momentum, sparking debates about privilege, accountability, and allyship. Schools incorporated these topics into curriculums, encouraging students to think critically about societal structures. Local businesses pledged support for diversity initiatives, recognizing the economic benefits of inclusivity. For Sarah, the waitress whose recording ignited the scandal, life became both challenging and rewarding. While trolls continued attacking her online, she found solace in the overwhelming support from allies worldwide. Organizations honored her courage, inviting her to speak at events and share her story. Determined to make a difference, Sarah pursued her dream of becoming a nurse, enrolling in classes and excelling academically. She hoped to use her platform to advocate for healthcare equity, ensuring underserved communities received proper medical attention. Residents of the city also played a crucial role in shaping its future. Town hall meetings drew record attendance, with citizens proposing innovative solutions to long-standing problems. Ideas ranged from implementing body cameras for all officers to creating civilian review boards empowered to investigate complaints. Lawmakers listened intently, incorporating feedback into legislation designed to promote transparency and trust. A turning point as years passed, the scandal faded from headlines, replaced by reports of positive developments. The police department underwent significant restructuring, adopting policies that prioritized de-escalation and cultural sensitivity. Training programs emphasized empathy, teaching officers to see individuals as human beings rather than stereotypes. Gradually, relationships between law enforcement and marginalized communities improved, though challenges persisted. For Mark, redemption remained a work in progress. He stayed active at the youth center, building connections with teens who reminded him daily of the impact one person can have, for good or ill. Though scars lingered, he embraced the opportunity to rebuild his life, focusing on making amends in small yet meaningful ways. Ryan, unfortunately, never found peace. Stubborn pride prevented him from seeking forgiveness, leaving him trapped in a cycle of resentment and regret. To outsiders, his downfall served as a cautionary tale about the dangers of clinging to denial instead of embracing growth. Ultimately, the scandal proved transformative, not just for those directly involved, but for the entire city. People learned valuable lessons about accountability, resilience, and the power of collective action. And while the road ahead remained uncertain, there was comfort in knowing that voices once silenced now echoed louder than ever before. Change was happening, and it promised a brighter tomorrow. Years had passed since the scandal that rocked the city, but its echoes still lingered in the hearts and minds of those who lived through it. The dramatic fall of Mark and Ryan, coupled with Judge Evelyn Carter's rise as a beacon of hope, left an indelible mark on society. Yet life moved forward, carrying both lessons learned and unresolved tensions. For Mark, redemption remained a fragile, ongoing process, while Ryan's descent into ruin served as a stark reminder of the consequences of unchecked arrogance. Meanwhile, Judge Carter continued to inspire change, ensuring her legacy extended far beyond the courtroom. Mark's journey toward healing in the small town of Maplewood, Mark found solace in the simplicity of everyday life. His mornings began early, often before sunrise when the world was quiet and still. He'd grab a cup of coffee, sit on the porch of his modest rental home, and watch the sun peek over the horizon. Those peaceful moments gave him time to reflect, to think about where he'd been and where he hoped to go. The youth center became Mark's sanctuary. Each day he walked there with purpose, eager to connect with the kids who relied on him for guidance. Over time, he earned their trust, proving himself not just as a mentor, but as someone genuinely invested in their futures. Many of the teenagers came from difficult backgrounds, facing challenges similar to those Mark once dismissed or misunderstood during his days as an officer. Now he listened intently, offering advice born from hard-won experience rather than judgment. One boy, named Jamal, reminded Mark painfully of Marcus Johnson, the young man whose case Judge Carter had dismissed years earlier. Jamal shared stories of being unfairly targeted by police in nearby towns, recounting how officers pulled him over repeatedly under questionable pretenses. At first, Mark felt defensive, tempted to explain away such behavior as part of the job. But then he remembered his own past mistakes and how they had hurt people like Jamal. Instead, he apologized sincerely, acknowledging the harm caused by prejudice within law enforcement. "I'm sorry," Mark said one afternoon after Jamal finished venting. "I used to be part of the problem. I didn't see you guys as individuals. I saw stereotypes. That wasn't fair and it wasn't right." Jamal looked surprised but nodded slowly. "It takes guts to admit that," he replied. "Most people wouldn't." Mark smiled faintly, grateful for the rare moment of understanding. Conversations like these helped him heal. Not fully, perhaps, but enough to keep moving forward. He knew redemption wasn't something achieved overnight. It required consistent effort and humility. And though guilt occasionally crept back in, reminding him of all he'd lost, Mark clung to the belief that he could make a difference, even in small ways. Ryan's final days. Ryan's story took a darker turn. Isolated and consumed by bitterness, he drifted further away from reality. Alcohol became his constant companion, dulling the pain temporarily but leaving deeper wounds each time. Friends stopped reaching out, family members severed ties, and neighbors avoided eye contact whenever they crossed paths. To most, Ryan was a ghost, a shadow of the man he used to be. Yet despite his self-destructive tendencies, Ryan occasionally experienced fleeting moments of clarity. Late at night, sitting alone in his dimly lit apartment, he'd stare at old photos of happier times, graduation ceremonies, family vacations, promotions at the precinct. These memories stirred conflicting emotions, pride in what he'd accomplished, versus shame for how he'd squandered it all. Sometimes he wondered if things might have turned out differently if he'd taken responsibility sooner, if he'd apologized instead of doubling down on denial. But pride always got in the way. Admitting fault felt like admitting defeat, and Ryan couldn't stomach the idea of appearing weak. So he pushed aside thoughts of redemption, convincing himself that the world owed him better treatment. This toxic mindset trapped him in a cycle of anger and despair, making recovery seem impossible. Eventually, Ryan's body gave out. Years of heavy drinking took their toll, leading to liver failure and other health complications. Hospitalized for the final time, he lay bedridden, staring blankly at the ceiling as machines beeped around him. Nurses tried to comfort him, speaking kindly and holding his hand, but Ryan barely registered their presence. In his last moments, images of the past flashed before his eyes, the faces of victims he'd wronged, the protests demanding justice, and Judge Carter's calm, unwavering gaze. As his breathing slowed and eventually stopped, Ryan died alone, unloved, and unforgiven, a tragic end to a life marred by hubris. Judge Carter's enduring impact. While Mark and Ryan grappled with their respective fates, Judge Evelyn Carter flourished. Her tireless advocacy for reform transformed systems and inspired generations. Promotions came steadily, culminating in her appointment to a higher court known for handling landmark cases involving civil rights. There, she presided over trials that challenged discriminatory practices, setting precedents that reshaped laws across the nation. Beyond the courtroom, Judge Carter championed education initiatives aimed at increasing diversity in the legal profession. Scholarships bearing her name supported aspiring lawyers from marginalized communities, helping them overcome financial barriers. Mentorship programs paired young professionals with seasoned judges and attorneys, fostering relationships built on mutual respect and shared goals. Her speeches resonated deeply with audiences worldwide. Whether addressing university graduates or international conferences, Judge Carter emphasized the importance of empathy, integrity, and perseverance. Change doesn't happen overnight, she often said. It requires courage, patience, and collaboration. We must listen to those whose voices have been silenced and work together to create solutions that benefit everyone. Even outside formal settings, Judge Carter led by example. She volunteered regularly at community centers, engaging directly with residents to understand their concerns. Her ability to connect with people from all walks of life reinforced her reputation as a leader, committed to inclusivity and fairness. To many, she represented not just a judge but a symbol of resilience, a testament to the power of determination and grace under pressure. A city transformed. Back in the city where the scandal unfolded, progress continued, albeit imperfectly. Reforms implemented in its wake reshaped policing practices, emphasizing accountability, transparency, and cultural sensitivity. Body cameras became mandatory for all officers, ensuring interactions were documented accurately. Civilian oversight. Boards reviewed complaints impartially, holding misconduct accountable without fear or favor. Community police relations improved significantly, thanks largely to outreach programs designed to foster trust. Officers attended workshops on implicit bias, learning to recognize and address prejudices that influence their actions. Residents participated in ride-alongs, gaining first-hand insight into the challenges faced by law enforcement while sharing their own perspectives. Dialogue replaced hostility, creating opportunities for collaboration rather than conflict. Activists celebrated victories big and small, knowing full well the fight for equality was far from over. They organized annual events commemorating the scandal, using it as a platform to highlight ongoing struggles and celebrate milestones achieved. Murals depicting Judge Carter and Sarah, the waitress-turned-hero, sprang up throughout the city, serving as visual reminders of the courage required to challenge injustice. For Sarah, life blossomed in unexpected ways. After completing nursing school, she secured a position at a local hospital, dedicating herself to caring for underserved populations. Patients praised her kindness and compassion, unaware of the pivotal role she'd played in sparking nationwide conversations about accountability. Though trolls occasionally resurfaced online, Sarah ignored them, focusing instead on building a fulfilling career and meaningful relationships. Reflections on justice and humanity. As the city evolved, so too did its collective understanding of justice and humanity. People recognized that true progress demanded more than policy changes. It required shifts in mindset and behavior. Conversations about privilege, allyship, and systemic inequities became commonplace, encouraging individuals to examine their roles in perpetuating or dismantling harmful structures. Judge Carter summed it up best during a keynote address at a national summit. Justice isn't merely about punishing wrongdoing. It's about restoring balance, repairing harm, and creating spaces where everyone feels valued and respected. It's about seeing each other as human beings, not labels or statistics, but people deserving of dignity and compassion. Her words resonated deeply, inspiring attendees to carry the message back to their communities. From classrooms to boardrooms, discussions centered on how to translate ideals into action. While challenges persisted, there was palpable optimism, a shared belief that incremental steps could lead to lasting change. Moving forward. Together, ultimately, the scandal proved transformative, not just for Mark Ryan and Judge Carter, but for the entire city. Lives intertwined, shaped by choices made in moments of triumph and failure. Some found redemption, others succumbed to regret. Yet, amid the complexity, one truth stood clear: actions have consequences, and every individual has the power to shape their destiny. As the sun set over the skyline, casting golden hues across streets once divided by fear and mistrust, residents paused to reflect. Years after the scandal that shook the city to its core, life had settled into a rhythm of reflection and renewal. The story of Mark, Ryan, and Judge Evelyn Carter became a defining chapter in the city's history, a tale of accountability, redemption, and justice. For some, the lessons learned were profound. For others, they served as warnings about the dangers of unchecked power and prejudice. As time passed, the community continued to grapple with these themes, striving to build a future rooted in fairness and equality. Mark's redemption. Mark's transformation remained incomplete but steady, like a river carving its way through a mountain over decades. In Maplewood, he had found a new purpose, one that allowed him to make amends without erasing the scars of his past. His work at the youth center became more than just a job. It was a lifeline, connecting him to people who saw beyond his mistakes and believed in his potential for change. One summer, Mark organized a project aimed at renovating the town's dilapidated basketball court. He rallied local businesses, volunteers, and teenagers to contribute their time and resources. Together, they transformed the cracked pavement into a vibrant space adorned with colorful murals celebrating unity and resilience. On opening day, families gathered to celebrate, laughing and cheering as kids played under the bright sun. Standing on the sidelines, Mark felt a sense of pride he hadn't known in years. Still, there were nights when guilt crept back in, whispering reminders of the harm he'd caused. During those moments, Mark would sit alone, journaling his thoughts or reading books recommended by James, the youth center director. One book, written by a former police officer turned advocate for social justice, struck a chord with him. Its message was simple yet powerful. You can't undo the past, but you can shape the future. These words became a mantra, guiding Mark as he navigated his journey toward healing. He also reached out to victims of his misconduct, writing letters of apology and offering whatever support he could provide. Some recipients responded, thanking him for taking responsibility. Others ignored his attempts at reconciliation. Either way, Mark understood that forgiveness wasn't guaranteed. It was something earned over time, if at all. What mattered most was his willingness to try. Ryan's legacy of regret. Ryan's death left a void filled with unanswered questions. Friends and family mourned not just his passing, but the wasted potential of a man who once dreamed of making a difference. At his funeral, attended by only a handful of distant relatives, memories of Ryan's earlier days surfaced. Stories emerged of a young officer eager to protect and serve, driven by ideals now overshadowed by bitterness and denial. In death, Ryan's legacy served as a cautionary tale. His refusal to acknowledge his wrongdoing highlighted the importance of humility and self-awareness. Community leaders referenced his downfall during workshops and seminars, urging participants to confront their biases before they escalated into irreversible damage. Even Judge Carter mentioned Ryan briefly in one of her speeches, emphasizing that redemption requires courage, and sometimes it's too late to turn back. Though Ryan's name faded from public memory, the impact of his actions lingered. Victims he'd wronged carried emotional scars, while colleagues who'd looked up to him questioned their own roles in perpetuating systemic issues. In this way, Ryan's story became a mirror reflecting society's flaws and a reminder of the need for vigilance. Judge Carter's enduring vision. Judge Evelyn Carter's influence extended far beyond her courtroom, shaping policies and inspiring movements nationwide. Her tireless advocacy for reform earned her accolades, including honorary degrees and awards recognizing her contributions to justice and equality. Yet she remained grounded, crediting her success to the countless individuals who stood beside her throughout her career. As a senior judge, she presided over landmark cases challenging discriminatory practices in housing, employment, and education. Her rulings set precedents that rippled across states, dismantling barriers faced by marginalized communities. Law students studied her opinions, marveling at her ability to balance compassion with legal rigor. To many, she represented the ideal jurist, wise, fair, and unyielding in her pursuit of truth. Beyond her professional achievements, Judge Carter prioritized mentorship. She established scholarships for aspiring lawyers from underrepresented backgrounds, ensuring diversity within the legal profession. Mentorship programs paired young professionals with seasoned judges, fostering relationships built on mutual respect and shared goals. Many credited her guidance with helping them navigate challenges unique to their journeys. Her speeches resonated deeply, often drawing standing ovations from audiences worldwide. Whether addressing university graduates or international conferences, Judge Carter emphasized the importance of empathy, integrity, and perseverance. Change doesn't happen overnight, she reminded listeners. It requires courage, patience, and collaboration. We must listen to those whose voices have been silenced and work together to create solutions that benefit everyone. Even outside formal settings, Judge Carter led by example. She volunteered regularly at community centers, engaging directly with residents to understand their concerns. Her ability to connect with people from all walks of life reinforced her reputation as a leader committed to inclusivity and fairness. To many, she represented not just a judge but a symbol of resilience, a testament to the power of determination and grace under pressure. A city reimagined. Back in the city where the scandal unfolded, progress continued, albeit imperfectly. Reforms implemented in its wake reshaped policing practices, emphasizing accountability, transparency, and cultural sensitivity. Body cameras became mandatory for all officers, ensuring interactions were documented accurately. Civilian oversight. Boards reviewed complaints impartially, holding misconduct accountable without fear or favor. Community police relations improved significantly, thanks largely to outreach programs designed to foster trust. Officers attended workshops on implicit bias, learning to recognize and address prejudices that influenced their actions. Residents participated in ride-alongs, gaining first-hand insight into the challenges faced by law enforcement while sharing their own perspectives. Dialogue replaced hostility, creating opportunities for collaboration rather than conflict. Activists celebrated victories big and small, knowing full well the fight for equality was far from over. They organized annual events commemorating the scandal, using it as a platform to highlight ongoing struggles and celebrate milestones achieved. Murals depicting Judge Carter and Sarah, the waitress-turned-hero, sprang up throughout the city, serving as visual reminders of the courage required to challenge injustice. For Sarah, life blossomed in unexpected ways. After completing nursing school, she secured a position at a local hospital, dedicating herself to caring for underserved populations. Patients praised her kindness and compassion, unaware of the pivotal role she'd played in sparking nationwide conversations about accountability. Though trolls occasionally resurfaced online, Sarah ignored them, focusing instead on building a fulfilling career and meaningful relationships. Reflections on justice and humanity. As the city evolved, so too did its collective understanding of justice and humanity. People recognized that true progress demanded more than policy changes. It required shifts in mindset and behavior. Conversations about privilege, allyship, and systemic inequities became commonplace, encouraging individuals to examine their roles in perpetuating or dismantling harmful structures. Judge Carter summed it up best during a keynote address at a national summit. Justice isn't merely about punishing wrongdoing, it's about restoring balance, repairing harm, and creating spaces where everyone feels valued and respected. It's about seeing each other as human beings, not labels or statistics, but people deserving of dignity and compassion. Her words resonated deeply, inspiring attendees to carry the message back to their communities. From classrooms to boardrooms, discussions centered on how to translate ideals into action. While challenges persisted, there was palpable optimism, a shared belief that incremental steps could lead to lasting change. Moving forward. Together, ultimately, the scandal proved Transformative, not just for Mark, Ryan, and Judge Carter, but for the entire city. Lives intertwined, shaped by choices made in moments of triumph and failure. Some found redemption, others succumbed to regret. Yet amid the complexity, one truth stood clear. Actions have consequences, and every individual has the power to shape their destiny. As the sun set over the skyline, casting golden hues across streets once divided by fear and mistrust, residents paused to reflect. They remembered the turmoil of the past, but also the resilience that carried them through. Voices once silenced now echoed louder than ever before, united in pursuit of a brighter, more equitable future. Change had come, and it promised to endure. The city stood stronger, bound by a shared commitment to justice and equality. And though challenges remained, hope prevailed, reminding everyone that progress was possible when courage met persistence.